We started off as investors and then became developers by making lots of mistakes. You have to learn from those mistakes as long as you own them and you fix them. If your customers are asking for things, you probably want to say yes to that. You probably want to take that feedback. What's motivating that and kind of why? Every business has problems. Everybody believes their business is unique. When you get a room full of people that have businesses, it's always the same problems. Having a partner that you trust and that you can work with means that you've got somewhere for an outlet for that and you've got someone to talk these problems through with.
Assuming you're a property developer, because why else would you be tuning into this podcast? And you're looking to become a better developer, then you won't want to miss our show this year. At our shows, you'll have the chance to listen to live expert speakers, network with like-minded professionals, and meet new service providers who can help you grow and perfect your property business. With Milton Keynes behind us, we're on to our next location in Bristol on the 30th of April, followed by Birmingham on the 16th of July, Manchester 10th of September, and finally, Leeds on the 8th of October. The show is created by developers, for developers, and the most amazing thing, tickets are completely free. Visit our website, propertydevelopershow.co.uk, to book your ticket today. Welcome to another episode of the Property Developer Show, the podcast. Today I'm joined by Paul Davis, co-founder of Nimbus. Nimbus has been running for over 10 years in its formal capacity, and it has over 60 members of staff. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Scott.
So we'll jump straight into the action, and we'll start where did Nimbus come from? Where did the idea of, utilizing the data and everything else that you've obviously formulated today, where did that journey sort of start for you guys?
Well, I suppose kind of back in the day, we were property developers and investors, largely investors actually, and kind of the journey to developer was quite a dodgy one. I can perhaps talk about that later. But ultimately what happened, we sort of ended up stumbling across the pub companies back in sort of 2008. And if you kind of cast your mind back to back then, sort of in the noughties, pub companies doing really well, kind of flying and growing like there was no tomorrow. And of course, then Lehman Brothers went bust in America, credit crunch hit, no one had got any money. The smoking ban had just happened. And so people couldn't go to the pub and have a cigarette at the same time. And so they were really struggling. And we'd got an investment that we got interest from Sainsbury's on. And we ended up approaching, like a lot of our customers do at Nimbus, approaching some neighbouring owners. And one of those was one of the big pub companies, Punch Taverns at the time. And we ended up being able to put this supermarket requirement onto that site over the road. And they were kind of really happy with this as a sort of as a model. And said, well, now you've done it on this one site, can we do some more? And they've got 6,000 of these pubs, So we sort of ended up moving into this world where we were trying to find opportunity and value in the portfolio. And the trouble was they didn't want to pay us for it. So we sort of had this list of 6,000 pubs and we were trying to find out, well, where could I convert those into supermarkets and where could I put residential in the car park or where could we convert it to a care home or something like that? And kind of the big problem was, well, to work that out, typically you'd go to the site and you'd sort of do a review and you'd write a report and this sort of stuff. And that would cost, a couple of £1,000 or something. And of course, a couple of £1,000 times 6,000 pubs was quite a lot of money and they didn't want to pay that. Mm-hmm. So we had to work out a way of doing it a bit more cutely. So we started using data and analysis to make all that happen. And so that was the very start of kind of what we're doing now, which is that sort of stuff. How do you use data to find opportunity and to drive value into properties and this sort of stuff. And so yeah, it was all down to pubs and smoking bans and credit crunch, stuff like that.
Wow. So I suppose for people that maybe haven't heard of Nimbus, and they might have been living under a rock if they haven't, but what is the company in its formality?
So we have a software platform that does that stuff basically, which is find opportunities, makes it really easy to assess them. So there's a sort of a big weight of work that we typically find, a lot of desktop research done to work out whether a site works for what someone might want to do with it. Often people can't find the right kind of opportunity. So there's lots of tools that kind of help you find opportunities in this sort of stuff. But then to really understand whether the property works or not, there's kind of a weight of research that then it kind of really speeds up. It typically is a click or two to kind of find that information, whereas otherwise you're bouncing around lots of different websites trying to kind of pull it all together really. So we sort of help find opportunities and help people kind of close those deals out with kind of stuff around connecting with the right people to make this stuff work really. But typically it's time saving and finding opportunities really.
Yeah, great stuff. So to, I guess, focus more on the journey of the business and the process of going from, just co-founders, you and your brother, is that right?
That's right,
yeah. To 65 members of staff.
Yeah.
What has that process been like, apart from stressful?
Yeah, I think there's lots of challenges. And I think sort of, I think everybody has problems. We started off, as I sort of said, it was investors, and then we sort of became developers by making lots of mistakes, and kind of I think you have to learn from those mistakes, and you have to kind of, I think, be open to the fact that you are making mistakes, and when you're making those mistakes, as long as you own them and you fix them, then that's fine. It's part of growing it, and often the businesses you expect to build aren't necessarily the ones that you end up building. And so we started off with a development investment company. We then set up a consultancy business that was trying to find this value out of these pubs. I think both businesses had different models. So, the investment business, it's high capital intensive, very low need for staff. The consultancy business was a services business. And so it was kind of very much around people and getting the right people to do the right work for you, very lumpy income, given it was kind of agency and it was development consultancy and stuff. And then we now got the sort of technology business and the software business, which is a very different model again. So it's recurring revenue streams and this kind of stuff. And so I think as we were building those sort of three businesses, we realized that the first two probably were much harder to build, and certainly trying to scale a service business is quite difficult. Mm-hmm. The sort of back in the day, trying to scale an investment business was quite difficult. And kind of what was the USP that we had that others didn't, and how would we make that kind of work? And so what we realized, I think, along that journey as well, is having three businesses, people didn't really know kind of who you were, what you did. Mm-hmm. And then were there kind of conflicts between those businesses as well? So how does an investor developer sell software to somebody to find investment and development opportunities? Do they kind of squirrel them away for themselves, or do they provide the best service they can for that business? And so we took a view that actually we need to put those things to one side and forget about them for a bit, and just focus on our technology company, where we were finding growth. We were finding it. We were finding people really like what we were doing, and they and there was kind of a USP on that. There was kind of a not many people really understand how you can use data to find these opportunities. There's a lot of people try, and some can and some can't. And I think that's where we realized we were pretty good at that, and that we should double down on that rather than sort of distract people with other stuff that was much harder to scale, much more kind of tricky, and perhaps we weren't particularly brilliant at that. I think we weren't bad at it, but we weren't any better than anybody else. And kind of holding yourself open to that and being self-aware of that, I think, is quite important, really.
Absolutely. Because that's a really good point. Leads quite nicely onto the question, having that sort of self-awareness to identify the distractions in a way. How did you kind of sort of come to that opinion, and what was the sort of, again, talking about process a lot in this episode, but what was the sort of process that went behind that? And also, how have you managed not to get distracted by potential other spin-off opportunities throughout that 10-year process?
Yeah. So I suppose it was kind of a key day when, so we were, I suppose back in that world of the consultancy business, we'd got a whole load of pubs that were back in an A4 use back in the day. Obviously, A4 now has moved to sui generis, but an A4 kind of quasi-retail kind of opportunity, quasi-retail kind of use. And at the same time, you've got a whole lot of retailers, supermarket chains typically, that were kind of really keen to take those district-type pubs that we could then convert into supermarkets. So on the one hand, we'd got a load of pubs through the pub companies, a load of retained clients that we were kind of working for, and then a load of supermarkets on the other side that were trying to take these units. We had PD rights to go from A4 to A1, really easy to get planning consent, and sort of a sequence of events that made that quite easy to kind of deliver, really. And one day we were sort of working with, it was Co-op at the time that we were working with, and we've seen a lot of pubs, and some of those were good, some of them were bad, and when the supermarkets were looking at those, they'd often go, well, this pub's no good, but the area's good, and we'd quite like something else around there. So we sort of go off and try and find some other stuff for them. And we were presenting back one day to Co-op with this list of stuff, the list of sites that people were interested in, and sort of the feedback was, well, these kind of sites are kind of okay and kind of interesting. What's this bit of software that you've got? And we were like, well, it's kind of, we've built it for this to kind of show this stuff. And I said, well, that's kind of interesting. Can we use it? And we immediately said, well, no, you can't. That's kind of, as part of our USP as this consultancy business. Mm-hmm. This is why you're not going to instruct Savills or Christie's or kind of one of the big businesses that have got lots of feet on the ground, loads of local knowledge, can really deliver a great service to sell a pub for you. But we were kind of the change of use kind of specialists. And this is kind of why you come to us, as this data, this technology and stuff in the background. And then we realized that actually, if your customers are asking you for things, you probably want to say yes to that. And you probably want to take that feedback and sort of what's motivating that and kind of why. And so we realized that we should try and say yes. And I think part of it was also fear of like, well, someone else will. And if they do, and they can generate a decent revenue stream out of the back of it, they'll invest much harder in this than we can. Because from us, we're going to have to sort of siphon off fees and sort of use that to pay for it. And so we realized that we were more interesting in that piece than we were in the other piece. And so we should really double down on that and focus on that. And then I think what then comes from that is, as you say, lots of distractions. There's lots of people saying, well, what you should do is do this, and you should do this, and you should do this. And I think one of the best tricks to that is asking your customers what they think you should do. And if they're all telling you to do that stuff, then you probably ought to. And I think we were quite good at that, because when Co-op said, can we buy this thing? Sort of the knee-jerk reaction is no. And you think, well, actually, what happens if we do say yes? And how does that kind of allow us to open up new things? And where might the world go to if we did that? And we sort of realized that was the right thing to do, really. We still get approached very regularly saying, well, why don't you just come work for us and just do a bit of site finding for us? And, and come and we'll put some money in. And it's like, well, you've got to be one thing or another. And I think that's kind of where I think we made the right decision at that time back in the day, because people have to be able to pigeonhole you. They have to be able to say, well, who are you and what are you doing? And therefore, if the world plays out as we expect it to, I know how you're going to act. And relationships are a big thing in that marketplace as well. So I think that's kind of what guided us, really, is kind of, what do your customers want you to do? And if you're straying away from that, there should be a very good reason for doing that if you're going to. And I think that was kind of the guiding star for all of that. And then, if you pigeonhole yourself and you try and do too many things, they could be lucrative. You can make money out of all sorts of things. But if it's too distracting, if it's too different from what your core business is, then you'll get weak at what your core is. And then people will come along and take it off you, or they'll sort of start nibbling away at heels at that. So you've got to be, I think, very, very focused on what you're trying to achieve. Absolutely. And that perhaps is also where you're interested as well. It's kind of, where are you passionate and kind of where are you good, where are you passionate, and go and focus on that stuff, right, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that's been one of the key factors to the success of Nimbus, of having that laser focus towards just delivering what Nimbus needs?
I think that's very important to what we do. Yes. Yes. There's a great quote from Steve Jobs, isn't there? It's kind of, it's about as much what you say no to as much as what you say yes to.
Yeah.
And sort of a big believer in that. It's very hard to say no to stuff. It's kind of, it's a great soundbite, and it's very hard to implement, especially when there's a very clear business case for all the stuff that you're trying to do. So it's very difficult. But I think certainly we've found, or certainly my take on it is that getting the right business model that you're happy with, doing the stuff that you're excited about, doing the stuff that you find really interesting is a great starting point.
So have you sort of found yourself, I guess, more, what's kind of your position in the business now, where you sort of sat, and what's that transition period been like for you personally? Yeah.
So, as I say, I'm sort of wildly interested about what are the problems the marketplace has got, and what can we do to help our customers with that. So I look after our, obviously, sales and marketing function. So how do we talk this through? I look after our R&D function. I've got a big team of people out in Sri Lanka who are incredible, actually. There's some amazing stuff that they're capable of. So, what are the things we could be building? Are those possible to build? I look after products. So if we are going to build them, what are they going to look like? How's that going to solve the problems of the marketplace? Are we talking to the market, make sure that actually they agree that this is the right stuff for us to build? And then sales and marketing, how are we telling the world about it, and how are we sort of packaging all that up to kind of really solve the problems that people want?
Looking at that kind of perspective, but from a personal perspective, how have you managed to stay ahead of that in terms of your personal growth? Have you, are you reading? Are you listening to, what's that process been like for you?
So I spend a lot of time on YouTube. That's kind of usually my sort of, my morning is trying to work out what the right mindset is, and kind of how, I think it's all about mindset is kind of the bit that I'm bothered about. We're now, I suppose at the level we're now at, we've got some phenomenal people around us that probably understand their area of the business better than I do. And so now it's about trying to get your mind in the right place, to ask the right questions, to be honest with yourself, be honest with the business, understand kind of what's really happening. And and so for me, I watch a lot on YouTube. A lot of it is trying to understand what other people have done. Kind of, I think one of the things that I've realised is that every business has problems. Everybody believes their business is unique, and to some extent it is. But when you get a room full of people that have businesses, it's always the same problems. So none of it actually is. It feels like you're the only person in the world that has this problem, and how can that anybody else possibly have that same problem? And then suddenly you realise, well, everyone's really got this same problem. Whether that's, I can't sell enough, or whether I've got this person here is driving me nuts for this reason, or like, it's all the same stuff typically. And so I think then also knowing that you can solve this stuff, and sort of having that kind of belief that you're going to solve this stuff is part of it really. So my approach is, a lot of it's YouTube. It's kind of watching and listening and trying to learn from other people who are talking about stuff that's kind of relevant. It's researching. That's kind of a lot easier now with some of the tools that are out there now, where you can be using AI to find some really interesting stuff and kind of get snapshots of stuff that's really helpful. So that probably is the trick. I think it's a lot of that mindset, I think, and a lot of it is about kind of trying to sympathize with the people that are working with you, trying to sit in their seat and trying to go, well, what are the problems they're seeing? What are they talking about? What are the things that are holding them back? And trying to help get through those things. And sometimes they just need to be able to just need to know that you know.
Yeah.
You just need to know that you know.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of where we've been.
Just very quickly interrupting this episode, have you got a property deal in mind? Want to build or grow your portfolio but unsure how to obtain funding? No problem. At Roma Finance, they love to lend. The borrower-first approach means Roma deliver flexible, tailored solutions that accommodate the diverse needs and experience of developers across residential and commercial projects. With a flexible criteria, Roma take time to understand each borrower's unique circumstances. Roma's attentive team are always equipped to handle and take on your requests. They will guide and support you throughout the property journey. Colleagues and customer relations are the beating heart of their business. Don't forget to explore Roma's website, romafinance.co.uk, for helpful resources, including articles and case studies to guide your financial decisions. Remember, Roma Finance love to lend. Your property goals are only a call or email away. Now back to the episode.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think the key thing for me is the fact that it is a personal mindset thing, and I suppose it's going through those levels of what you've been through over the last 10 years with Nimbus to get to where you are. How's it sort of been working with brother? Because it can be one side, I'll never work with my family, other side, I wouldn't imagine working without my family. How's that been?
Great. Yeah, brilliant. And I think, as I say, everybody's got problems, and you think they're all your own. But actually having a sort of a partner that you trust and that you can work with means that you've got somewhere for an outlet for that, and you've got someone to talk these problems through with. And so we get on well. We work hard together. I think you kind of probably have to have a mindset that goes, we'll try and leave work at home. Sorry, try and leave work. try and leave work at work rather than try and leave work at home, and trying to have. It's almost two relationships. There's a work relationship and there's a personal relationship, and trying to make sure that those two things work well together. Mm-hmm. It's not always easy. Sometimes you have different opinions around stuff, and I think again, Steve Jobs talks about kind of a good product. There's quite a lot of friction that comes out of a good product. People rubbing up against each other, trying to sort of understand what the right thing is. He has this analogy around kind of a rock polisher thing. He talks about you put rocks in and kind of it polishes, but it's because they bounce together and sort of, and what comes out is a very neatly polished, great answer. And so there's quite a lot that goes on, I think, as well. Of you have to rub up against each other. You have to kind of have that difference of opinion. That's what kind of creates a great output, because you're looking at stuff in different ways and you're sort of trying to reconcile what the right answer to this is. And it's being open to the fact that somebody else knows more about what you know about this problem. They've got a different view of the world, and actually that is equally as valid. We had a very interesting sort of example of that, because when we were doing the pub stuff, there was a sort of two key people we were working with, and they were sort of quite different people. One was very aligned to my kind of personality, and the other one was completely opposite end of the sort of the personality and different approach to the way that they ran things. And at the time, I couldn't understand the way in which those decisions were being made. And what I realized was that different people have different skill sets. Mm-hmm. And just because one person has a similar skill set to me and looks at the world in the same way that I do, I could understand their decisions and it all felt very logical. Whereas another guy had something completely different in his mind as to how he interacted with people and how he sort of understood things, but got to the same answer. And so I sort of realized there's two ways to the right answer. Mm-hmm. And just because someone's going in a different way, doesn't mean they won't get to the right place.
Sure.
And I found that very helpful because often, at the start of it, you're going in different directions. You're going, well, they clearly don't get it. This is weird. Mm-hmm. But actually it came back to the same place. I thought was fascinating, really.
Yeah. I mean, just on that point then, do you think, the success of Nimbus is often, or success of any business is often down to the people that are directing it. So how do you sort of formulate from maybe where someone has that different set of opinion and it might not necessarily lead to the same place, but it might kind of change the direction of the business. It might be a software piece, marketing piece, sales piece. How do you sort of formulate the kind of outcome from all of these opinions, 65 members of staff, two of them, two of you at the top? How do you sort of filter through to create this success at the end of it?
So I think the answer to that is that you, I guess your day-to-day role changes. So I suppose now what we're trying to do is to say, these are the key things we stand for. These are the key things that we believe Nimbus is all about. And we have values, we have a certain direction that we believe we should go in with the business, certain problems that we think are really important, and sort of agreeing those and trying to set those as markers in the sand as to this is the stuff that we think is important, often means then that there's a number of day-to-day decisions that can be made by the people. And provided they know what you're trying to achieve at that kind of overall direction level, then you can kind of get everybody lined up. Mm-hmm. And then if people make a slightly different decision, doing different things along that journey, they have to be allowed to make those decisions. And those can be wrong. And if they're wrong, that's fine. They just need to know that they need to own that and they need to then go and fix it. Mm-hmm. And I think then, provided they have that mindset, mistakes are fine. You can make mistakes as long as you go back, learn from it and fix it. It's fine. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, hopefully they're not the business kind of mistakes, but if they are, that's slightly more of a challenge. But typically they're not. Very few things are that kind of level, frankly. And so I think that's the trick.
It's embracing failure in a way.
Yes. Yeah. I think you have to. Yeah. There's a great quote from Jeff Bezos, is that experimentation and failure are sort of go hand in hand. Mm. And so if you're not failing at things, if you know the answer and there's no chance you're going to fail on it, it's not an experiment. Mm-hmm. And if you're not experimenting, you're not finding out new stuff, and you're not moving forward. And so you kind of have to embrace that and have to be happy with it.
Absolutely. I love the phrase, if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough.
Yes.
Because it is, the absolute truth. And I think it's making those mistakes, formulating what works, what doesn't work, to then make the key decisions to get, the growth and the scale and everything else. So what kind of challenges, other than, the typical sort of staff and, the usual kind of challenges that come with scaling a business, is there any sort of other challenges, particularly in the sector that you're in, you've sort of faced over the last few years?
I don't think so. As I suppose it kind of brought back to what I said earlier, is that most businesses have problems, and most of them are similar.
Yeah.
And so I guess maybe that's my mindset when I answer this question of like, what's different from everybody else's challenges that you guys have got. I think I sort of deep down believe my problems are the same as everybody else's problems. Mm-hmm. I think problems are always problems. You can be growing like fun and you've got problems, or you can be, struggling with whatever and you've got problems. You can be running out of cash, you've got problems. Like there's all of those things are problems. They're just different problems. Mm-hmm. And so, and I think everybody's got the same sort of stuff, really. There's always a problem, and depending on where your business is and how it's doing, there'll be other businesses with the same problem, really. So maybe I'm answering that question with a maybe I'm skewed in my mindset as to how I answer that question. Really, is that I'm sure our problems are the same as everybody else's. Really,
no, absolutely. Yeah, I think it kind of leans into what we've kind of been discussing. Definitely. What are the kind of next sort of 5 years? What do they look like for Nimbus? What direction are you guys kind of going at the moment?
So we've got some really interesting stuff that we're working on at the moment, and I think the direction we'll take it is it's more of the same. Ultimately, it's growth. It's trying to solve more of these problems that we're trying to solve. A lot of that is around the particular assets, the markets they sit in, the opportunities to change those assets into something else, to create value out of them. It's sort of the same old stuff that we've been doing for 10 years, really. It's just next level up on that. And there's kind of lots of new things we can be doing, lots of new technology we can be using, and all this kind of stuff. So it's more of that, really. It's growth, it's scale, it's continuing on that path. I think that needs to be controlled. I think wild, outrageous growth is slightly scary, and I think that creates its own problems. So it's very tempting. It's very tempting to go as fast as you can. So yeah, that's probably sort of a waffly answer to more of the same. Deeper understanding of land, buildings, deeper understanding of the marketplace they sit in, deeper understanding of things you can do with those buildings. It's kind of what we're really interested in. Deeper understanding of the markets, the people, everything that kind of hangs off it, really. So,
what do you think the mindset behind kind of what you've just alluded to there? Exponential growth can be quite aggressive. It comes with its own challenges. Because that's what a lot of people chase. They chase that because they think more is better, bigger. So have you kind of experienced something that has given you that opinion on growth, or is it very much just your approach to the business and how you've kind of grown Nimbus to date?
Yeah. Yes, there are examples of why I'm saying that. I think that I'll sort of be slightly careful in how I answer it. Because I think if you go too aggressively too quickly, you promise things that you may not be able to deliver. And I think that's a difficult thing, especially when people are backing you and putting money in to do that. Because typically that sort of growth needs an element of cash that typically the business won't have to go at that pace. And so I think what that can then mean is that things start to fall apart in lots of different ways, and sort of relationships at the top of businesses start to get strained and all that kind of stuff. And the direction of the business can be quite difficult to set out if you're trying to achieve things that are way too much. So this is something actually on the way up here today, where there was kind of this theory of sort of put a growth of 10% in, which is obviously very, 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 very light compared to what we look at, because then you can always smash it. And then you're not worried about, well, actually, what decision am I making based on how do I hit the growth target that I've set? And if that growth target is too high, then perhaps I'm making decisions that mean that I hit this year's number, but actually next year looks a bit of a problem, and I'll deal with that later. We should be thinking about that at the same time, making sure that what we're building is sustainable, it's got solid foundations, and it's going to be here next year, and it's going to be delivering the same growth or a bit more this time next year. And so I think that needs to be carefully understood, rather than just trying to go for growth at all cost.
It's a really unique, I think, outlook on business, because a lot of, particularly in the software space, everyone's chasing PE, VC, investment, exit. I think your approach is, I would say, quite unique in that sort of space particularly. But I think it's credit to the strength of the brand, really. Just kind of on that sort of same note, how have you kind of stayed ahead of competition in the space? Because I'm assuming when you started out, there wasn't that many people doing what you're doing now. Obviously now it's a little bit different. So how have you kind of managed to stay ahead of everyone else?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's a deep understanding of what we're trying to achieve, a deep understanding of what the customer's bothered about, and being very honest about that, and being very honest about kind of what does everything else look like, and why are we different, and how do we how do we deliver the value that our customers are looking for, really? And I think if you go in with that mindset, then typically you create great products and people find great value out of it, and they're very happy as a result of that. And so I think it sort of it flows out of that attitude towards understanding what your customers are bothered about, being prepared to understand that you could be wrong and that they're trying to tell you that. And often customers will tell you where you're getting it wrong. Very happy to do that typically. Often they'll tell you where you're doing it well as well. And I think also sometimes, certainly as a founder, often people will tell you things and perhaps won't tell you the stuff you're doing badly. They'll just tell you the stuff they're good at because they want to make you feel happy, And so sort of provoking that conversation and sort of making it okay for them to say, yeah, you're not very good over here, are you? And because then you know what to sort out, don't you? So I think it's just that open mindset of, we must make mistakes in some places. A question of how do we find it quickest and how do we fix it? And I think that typically then means you've got a great product that the marketplace wants. I think it's also about I think if you understand that marketplace and you hold yourself honest to what it is you're delivering and actually how helpful it is, how helpful the stuff you're delivering is the stuff that you're creating truly new and truly helpful, and is it really solving a proper market problem? It can be quite easy to kind of get carried away with, I think this is really interesting over here, and we should go and build this thing over here. That, and I think it's being open to the facts and thinking through at a deep level, kind of, what is the true impact of that, and does the customer really care about that, or is this just something you kind of find interesting? You want to build it because you think it'd be interesting, and so I think trying to balance that stuff is sort of the key trick, really.
Makes sense. In terms of like Nimbus exposure to outside factors like economic factors, the market changes, shifts in government, that sort of stuff, do you guys feel the impact of that? Does that have an impact on revenue and operations, or are you kind of buffered from that sort of stuff, insulated?
Yeah, I think it probably affects us in slightly different ways. We have a very broad customer base, and I think what you tend to find in the property industry is that so we're selling software to property people, and so often what you find is that as the market swings, there's parts of the sector do really well and parts of the marketplace do really badly. And often in property, there's money to be made in both markets. If the property market's coming down, there's money to be made. If the property market's going up, there's money to be made. If it's flat and stagnant, it's kind of more of a challenge typically. So I think we often feel in some parts of the marketplace when things are a problem, then that marketplace will struggle some more, and then people might go bust, and they're going bust, and they're not not going to buy software off us if that's the case. So we do feel a bit of that. Typically, that's offset by other parts of the marketplace doing really well as part of that, and therefore we sort of feel the swing the other side as well as the other market picks up when one market's struggling. That we tend to find we're a bit buffered from that. I think we're a pretty useful product, and I think if a business is there and actually sort of working in that marketplace, even if the marketplace is struggling, typically they need the software to kind of sort of a world without Nimbus and a world with Nimbus is typically two different worlds, and so it has to be pretty dire times for you not to want to have that technology to support you. So we tend to find that we don't have huge impacts on that. But they, if a business goes bust, it goes bust, and they don't need software at that point. So we get a bit of it, but also we still have the same things of staff wanting paid more each year. If there's high inflation, we've got to pay more and this sort of stuff. So all of that same stuff. And I say, hence the comment earlier is that everyone's got those same problems, and it's just different business, different day, different problems, but they're all problems, and you just got to pick up, sort them out, and move on, haven't you? Really? So
absolutely. Is there a sort of ceiling to the market size of Nimbus in terms of new customers and new people coming to the market, international growth? What does that sort of look like?
Yeah, we don't particularly there's a huge sort of ceiling on it at the moment. I think there's an awful lot more that needs doing. There's an awful lot more. I think even though we're 10 years into this, the marketplace is only really starting to adopt it properly at the moment. I think it's gone through phases. 10 years ago, I remember 10 years ago playing golf with a local agent, sort of locally. I saw him saw him yesterday actually, sort of playing golf with him and him going, boys, it's not the way it's done, boys, and so, 10, 12 years ago, that was the marketplace we were in. And so you're having to work quite hard to get people to understand what it is you're doing and why. Mm-hmm. I think their market's changed immeasurably now. And I think that there are people that don't get technology and don't want to get technology, but I think they acknowledge how useful it is and how much time it can save and how beneficial it is. And so I think the market has moved now. But I think we're only just scratching the surface of what we're capable of doing. And so I think there's some much deeper problems we can solve. I think that comes from new technologies that are out there. Compute power kind of getting to a level now where a lot of this stuff's, it's all the same things again. It's the things we can now do are kind of way ahead of what we could do 10 years ago. And when you look back at some of the old screenshots we've got from early versions of this thing and kind of the stuff that it was doing, the first versions of Nimbus that we sold, you couldn't even get an address on a property. It was kind of, you click a title and you might get one address in 5. And so you're sort of trying to work out, well, which one am I looking at? I want to look at 25, and well, that one's 21, and that one up there is 29. So it's 1, 2, and so that sort of stuff. And so the world kind of moves on very quickly, and so I think that there's an awful lot more problems that we can solve that drives an awful lot more value into our customer base. As those problems solve, there's much bigger markets that open up as part of that. And so we're not struggling with kind of, saturation in our market and this sort of stuff. There's a very wide marketplace for us to go after. And I think lots of different places that we can take this business to keep opening that stuff up, really. So not really is the answer, yeah.
Amazing, exciting. So to round the episode off very nicely, what's one of the biggest lessons that you've learned to date? And that can be personal, business, however you want to answer it.
Gosh, that's a good question. What have I learned? I lost my wife. I think it's being open to the fact that you could be wrong and sort of not being scared of that and knowing you can fix this stuff and knowing that as long as you own it, as long as you're open to the fact that there's problems out there, just fix them and move on to the next one, and sort of not being scared of that and not being scared of, it's as simple as that, I think, really. It's just that kind of open mindset, that kind of, I think that's really, really important to take things forward, really. And
Great.
The confidence is that you can solve it.
Great stuff. I like it. So if people want to find out more about Nimbus, or they want to, find land or, utilize the software in some capacity, how can they go about doing that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, welcome to kind of, we've got a website, www.nimbusmaps.co.uk. We have a team of people there that will kind of help guide people through it, show them the system, show them the things they can do, show them how it helps, show them often find stuff that you didn't realize was there. And it can be quite bizarre, really, because you walk down streets all the time and don't realize kind of the stuff that's there, really. So yeah, get in touch with us there, ring us up, jump on the website,
Amazing.
Send us an email. Happy to help.
Failing that, they can come along to the Property Developer Show and meet you guys.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Well, I appreciate you coming on today, Paul. And it was third attempt to get you on due to my fault and your fault and everyone's fault. So we're here now. But
Absolutely.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on.
Delighted to see you. Thanks, Scott.
Good stuff. Thank you very much for tuning in. A little bit of a different episode in the sense of looking into the business side of, scaling something of Nimbus size, which is obviously a very amazing achievement, Paul and his brother, and obviously the team as well. So hopefully there's some good stuff to unpick there if you're looking to diversify within property and look at ways to start a trading business that fits the kind of property scope. As always, please do like and subscribe, and do leave a review on the audio version. It helps us to continue to get amazing guests like Paul. We'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.